Hello, Player One. Welcome to the Gaming History Club. My name is Gabby.
Hello, and I'm JP. Today on Gaming History Club, historical fiction meets historical accuracy. Sharpen your hidden blades, Player One, because we're about to relive our ancestors' memories and parkour assassinate some Templars. Are you ready for a leap of faith? So, we actually thought to ourselves, is Assassin's Creed even old enough to justify an episode from the Gaming History Club? Well, yeah, duh. Assassin's Creed is going to be celebrating its 20th anniversary soon.
Oh my god, I feel really old.
I know, we've been saying this a few times now recently, but we are kind of getting old, aren't we? That's why we make podcasts about playing video games rather than just playing the video games.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, like, my experience with Assassin's Creed is a little bit different than yours, obviously, because you actually played, like, almost all of them, right? The entire franchise.
Yes, and since the start too. So I did legit start with Assassin's Creed 1. I was even looking forward to the game. I remember watching the advert, the commercial for it, like on repeat for a while with that awesome track from Justice, Genesis.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I think I played all of them apart from Unity and Rogue. And I think I remember why as well. Like, they all kind of came out very, very close to each other. And I mean, I didn't like burn out from Assassin's Creed, but at that time I was playing like so many video games that I was easily distracted as well by other games, I think. Yeah, so I did leave it for a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, but then came back to it and we picked up with Origins again, didn't we?
Yeah, that's true. So I was busy playing Ratchet and Clank around the time Assassin's Creed was, first released actually. So didn't really play Assassin's Creed back then. And then, when we got together, we started playing Origins together and basically revisiting all of the older ones. So I started with the more RPG ones, I suppose. Than the, quote unquote old school Assassin's Creed type of game.
Yeah, that has started a lot of controversy, didn't it, when they started making them a lot more RPG-esque. I'm kind of easy on both. I see the cool sides on both of them. I'm not too fussy with the RPG elements, really. I'm a little bit more heartbroken that the modern day story that it tells is a little bit like less now. I actually quite enjoyed that. How do you feel about Assassin's Creed? Because mostly you are used to Origins and onwards, so you've always kind of experienced it with the RPG elements already in.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of the same with you. I see the appeal for both, and I kind of enjoy both anyway for what they are. Not really a big fan of the modern times element on the newer ones. I definitely see the appeal of like being Desmond and stuff in the older ones, which is a bit of a shame because there is a lot to explore there as well in the newer ones. But yeah, I mean, if we're talking about shadows, we barely even touch on the Animus part of things.
Yeah, it seems to be a bit of an afterthought now. I hope that Assassin's Creed isn't going to turn into just this, game that gets released every 3 years, and it's gonna be about, the pieces of Eden, and then nothing really gets talked about. Though it's just you're an assassin, they get stolen from you, or you have to find them, and then you find them, and then that's kind of it. Because I like an overarching plot element as well, like what glues all these games together. Yeah, you rarely even see different protagonists interacting with each other. Actually, like you don't get to see Naoe and Yasuke talk to Alexios, for example, and all that kind of thing. But
In that
anyway,
sense, yeah.
enough about us two. As you can tell, Player One, we really enjoy Assassin's Creed. But let's give you a taste of what's to come in this episode. We'll be looking at how the first Assassin's Creed game was made, what inspired it, and just how much of the game is actually accurate compared to the historical order of assassins, and what they actually have in common. So we're not going to go too much into, Assassin's Creed 2, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, Assassin's Creed Revelations, Assassin's Creed 3, Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, etc., etc., etc. It's mostly going to be the origins of... Oh, you see what I did there? The origins? No,
Sure.
It's mostly going to be about Assassin's Creed 1 and what led up to it.
So not Origins.
No, not origins, but the origins.
Okay, makes sense. Well, if that's the case, let us start by time traveling back to 2004 to meet another fellow time traveler. So we landed on a comfortable couch with a GameCube controller in our hands, and we're playing Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. Great game.
Oh, yeah.
So this game was a huge hit. The standout game mechanic was the ability to reverse time to fix your very unheroic mistakes. A gameplay feature that was first envisioned by the game's director, Patrice Desilets. So, following the success of Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, the publisher and developer of the game, Ubisoft Montreal, asked Patrice to get to work on another Prince of Persia title for the next generation of consoles. Nobody knew anything yet about, PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 at this time, so they were not announced yet at this point, and so were their specs. So they were just kind of like grasping in the dark here.
Yes, like an assassin, you might say.
But despite it still in the dark, Ubisoft wanted more than nicer graphics. So they gave the challenge to Patrice to redefine the action adventure genre for the next game that's yet to come.
Yeah, and so with that extremely tall order, Patrice and a small team of 7 people quickly went to work. One of the first decisions was a move away from the prince himself. Since Patrice had only just finished a game that was all about the prince, he envisioned a more action oriented character and not a prince because, well, in Patrice's own words, is a prince not just someone waiting to be a king? So Patrice was actually inspired by a book that he read back in college, which was all about secret societies. And the first story in that book was a story about the Old Man of the Mountain, which was a title or nickname of sorts that was given to all of the leaders of the real historical order of assassins that existed between 1090 and 1275 AD. And as you might be aware, as a fan of Assassin's Creed, a fictionalized version of the Old Man of the Mountain would make it into the first Assassin's Creed game. The character would be reinvented as Al-Mualim, who serves as the mentor and endgame antagonist of the main character Altair. But let's get back to the development. Since the new generation of consoles was still a mystery to the development team, they didn't consider an open world Assassin's game just yet. So the art director Nicolas Cantin and the animation director Alex Duran recounted early ideas that were developed into fake footage the team made to present to Ubisoft, and it had playable assassins protecting and escorting a non-playable prince. So basically like a game-long escort mission, it sounds like to me. Obviously this is like fake footage, it wasn't very far in development. So this idea actually reminds me a lot of Resident Evil 4 with Leon being like the assassin and Ashley basically playing the prince role or princess role.
So during development, the lead programmer Matthew Mazzaroli took special interest in the wall climbing. He said it was the brainchild of the lead programmer from Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, and it would take years to fully develop into the game. But once the next generation of consoles were announced with the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, well, I guess another one is Nintendo Wii, but there was no Assassin's Creed for the Wii, so let's drop that one for now. But yeah, by this time, the developers had a fresh sense of ambition with the kind of game they wanted to make. And the game became increasingly different to anything resembling Prince of Persia Assassins, as the game was being called during its early conception and development.
Yeah, so the next generation really opened up the creative and technological opportunities. The team was going to make a bigger world, entire crowds could now be rendered on screen at the same time, hundreds even, which is a far cry from Prince of Persia's limitation of just 8 characters at the same time. And see why I did that, by the way? I name dropped another Ubisoft game, Gabby. Far Cry.
Okay.
Not only was the world going to be bigger, it was going to be open. If there was one popular element in gaming in the 2000s, it was without a doubt open world, marked by the massive popularity of GTA 3, released in 2001, of course.
Yeah, and of course, like free roaming sandbox style of game was a hot topic that not just us players were aware of, but of course, developers very much knew this as well. But what truly set the world of Assassin's Creed apart from those of other games was the will to make the cities historically accurate as far as reasonable.
Yeah, so Nicholas Canton, the production art director we mentioned earlier, believed that when dealing with history, it was best to take a more serious approach. There was a lot of research into the medieval cities during the Crusades, ensuring that they were more realistic than fantastical. So, in a really amazing article from Polygon, which we took as reference for this episode, he said, also, the assassins don't jump. They don't do crazy jumps like the Prince of Persia can do. Which is true, but did anyone tell him they didn't jump from castles into haystacks either, or that they were fist fighting with the Pope?
Okay, of course we're just being cheeky here. I mean, the team threaded that fine line between authenticity and making sure the gameplay is actually fun really, really well, and it's a staple of the franchise as a whole until now. David Chateauneuf, the lead level designer, explained how difficult it was to build a world that offers good traversal opportunities in an open world setting.
So now the key elements of what would make Assassin's Creed had now been put on the table: an open world with believable, realistic and historical cities, the parkour, the big crowds, and the social stealth rather than the hide in the dark type of stealth. To me, it was really surprising to find out Assassin's Creed came out of Prince of Persia, to be honest. The games are so different, and yet at the same time, it makes so much sense when you hear about how the game came together but then grew into its own kind of game. I wonder actually how often this has happened, because I know of only one other time where this occurred, and that's with Devil May Cry, because that was actually born out of an attempt to make Resident Evil 4. Just to mention Resident Evil 4 yet again in this completely unrelated episode to Resident Evil.
We surely talk about Resident Evil a lot in an episode that's not about Resident Evil.
I know, yeah.
But yeah, perhaps this could be another chit chat episode one day. Yeah, I seem to remember we talked about this before as well, but you know what? Can't think of it right now.
We're pushing 50 episodes, so
Yeah, it's quite a lot, isn't it? But anyway, let's get back to Assassin's Creed, which, by the way, at this point of development, still not being called Assassin's Creed and still has the prince attached to it somehow. So let's see what lead up to the full removal of the prince itself then, in the end.
yeah, so the small concept team at Ubisoft Montreal realized that the game they envisioned for the next gen has grown so far in scope and theme that there was actually very little need to keep the prince in the game at all. But the team still had to get approval from Ubisoft's headquarters in Paris. So Nicolas Cantin told that when they presented their concept to Ubisoft, they never mentioned the name Prince of Persia. It was all about assassins. And their main reference book was a novel called Alamut, which we'll talk about a little later as well. Patrice Desilets tells a very similar story from his point of view. It took Ubisoft a while to warm up to the idea and fully understand it and get behind it. After 2 years, none of their documentation or presentations even mentioned the words Prince of Persia anymore, and how for the first 2 years in the inner circle, they simply called it Prince of Persia Assassins.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine, the Ubisoft board, for example, listening to this, like, yes, this is like reference from this novel called Alamut, and they're just like,
What are you guys talking
yeah.
about? Did you guys not hear the ask? I asked you specifically, Patrice, make a new Prince of Persia game. At what point did you get lost here, pal?
But yeah, Patrice believes that it was at the Game Developers Conference of 2006 when somebody from marketing asked, so what if it's called Assassin's Creed? And Patrice immediately liked the idea because, in his word, the assassins existed for real, the Ismailia faith and group, and so their motto was nothing is true, everything is permitted. And Patrice believed this was great for the game. He also truly believes in the motto and has said on more than one occasions that he does truly believe in the idea of nothing is true, everything is permitted. He even says it's not only a way of playing, it's the way of living, that there is no dogma, really, only the one that you accept. But actually, if we delve deeper, was that their actual motto?
Hmm. So this is a good time to look into what inspired the actual plot of Assassin's Creed and how accurately the depiction of the real Order of Assassins was in the game, as well as from their main point of reference, which was the novel written by Vladimir Bartol, first published in Slovenian in 1938, named after the Persian mountain fortress Alamut Castle, which is where the real Order of Assassins was formed by Hassan-i Sabah when he captured the castle in the year 1090. The book and the game share plot elements, themes, and even a core philosophy, one that challenges the very idea of truth and authority. So let's talk about Alamut, the novel, not the castle for now.
Okay.
Set in the 11th century Persia, Alamut tells the story of Hassan-i Sabah, the charismatic and ruthless leader of the Nizari Ismailis. From his mountain fortress, he builds an elite force of warriors, the Fedayeen, who are trained to obey without question and to sacrifice their lives if commanded. But here's the twist. Hassan maintains control not through faith, but deception. He constructs a fake paradise in the fortress gardens, and that's complete with beautiful women, intoxicating drugs, and illusions of heaven. And so the recruits are drugged, taken to this garden, and convinced they've been to paradise. The message? Die for Hassan, and you'll return there forever. The story follows a young warrior, Ibn Tahir, who begins as a true believer but is slowly uncovering the lie. After committing a political assassination, he learns of the manipulation behind his mission. And so now, disillusioned, he confronts Hassan, who coolly reveals his ultimate belief. Nothing is an absolute reality, all is permitted.
So, fast forward to 2007, where the first Assassin's Creed was released, where you play as Altair, a master assassin operating during the Third Crusade. Just like Ibn Tahir, Altair is loyal to his order and its leader Al-Mualim, who is based directly on Hassani Sabah. As the story unfolds, Altair completes a series of high-profile assassinations, only to realize that Al-Mualim has been manipulating him all along, using a powerful artifact, the Piece of Eden, to control minds and push his own vision of order. Well, I guess this is not so much of a spoiler, but yeah, and in the end of the game, Altair rebels, kills his master, and begins reforming the Assassin Brotherhood with a new understanding. Nothing is true, everything is permitted.
So yeah, we could say that Assassin's Creed is quite heavily inspired by the plot of the book Alamut. But the key difference is the method by which the antagonist manipulates his followers. In Alamut, it is by way of a fake paradise using deception and drugs, and Assassin's Creed obviously has that more sci-fi way of doing it with the Apple of Eden. But quite interestingly, on a side note, talking about the drug deception in Alamut, so it was namely hashish. So accounts from Crusaders and other medieval chroniclers, like even notably Marco Polo, claimed that the assassins, or as they are known in Arabic, the Hashashin, used the drug hashish before carrying out their political assassinations. And it is actually thought that the etymology, so the history of the word assassin, can be traced back to literally Hashashin, meaning hashish users. However, modern scholars and etymologists view this with quite a lot of skepticism. So that might not be the way that, the word assassin came to be. It's probably not coming from hashish, basically. And talking about Marco Polo, he also claimed to have heard of this assassin's garden paradise. So this is, also got a little grain of truth in, because Marco Polo obviously very much existed, and the Alamut novel took that and kind of inspired that whole fake paradise idea. So let's talk about the Castle Alamut a little bit as well. When it was finally surrendered by the invading Mongols in 1256, so too was their library. And accounts from contemporary historians who actually visited this library shortly before it was destroyed did report that it contained huge amounts of philosophical, mathematical, astronomical, and historical documents. So the text often dealt with Tawil, which is the esoteric interpretation of the Quran. So it made the library not just a place of learning, but a gate to hidden knowledge as well.
But let's see, what else was destroyed in the library of Alamut? The assassin's own documentation and perspective, actually. We simply don't know much about them apart from their sworn enemies, Crusaders and Orientalists, from hundreds of years later that sensationalized and exaggerated on second-hand accounts because we don't have that documentation. So whether the assassins truly used hashes before or in order to carry out assassinations, or if they were brainwashed into becoming followers as such, we likely won't ever really find out. Much of it, when looked at soberly, is kind of just folklore and legends, really.
Yeah, that's right. So without the original library that was at Alamut Castle, who knows? Because we just don't know what were they saying. The reasons are for what they do, and what assassinations did they officially own up to. We
Hmm.
have no idea. We know nothing about them from their own first-hand accounts. Just their rivals, the Crusaders. But anyway, let's turn back to the Order's alleged motto: nothing is true, everything is permitted. It was allegedly said by Hassan I Sabah shortly before dying in his deathbed. This is the real legend myth now, not just from the novel Alamut. This is the real legend that people have said, like he said this apparently before dying in his deathbed. So there is no evidence in authentic medieval Ismaili sources that Hassan I Sabah ever said or wrote this phrase. We can actually trace this legend back to a book called The History of the Assassins, released in German by the Austrian Joseph von Hammer-Purgstall in the year 1818. So it was common for Orientalists, which is basically people who studied anything east of Europe. So nowadays you'd probably call that Asian or Middle Eastern studies. But back then we had Orientalists, and everything east of Europe was just the same kind of thing. It was like, oh, the Orient, right? And they obviously, well, in hindsight, had a bias that made the East appear like very exotic and as the home of hidden mysterious truths and dangerous freedoms in a very sensationalized manner. And Joseph von Hammer-Purgstall likely based his accounts on interpretations of crusaders in texts, such as, for example, Marco Polo, rather than actual Eastern texts or sources, if that makes sense. So, yeah, he probably wasn't like completely coming up with something by himself. He wasn't freestyling it, but it's probably got misinterpreted by other Western sources, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean to say that there is nothing to the poetic, mystical quote, though. Quite on the contrary, right? It garnered notoriety and analysis among philosophers afterwards.
Yeah, that's right. So there's definitely something to the quote and has been picked up by philosophers. Most noteworthy is actually Friedrich Nietzsche. So he references the phrase in his philosophical novel Thus Spoke Zarathustra, which was published in 1883. And he also incorrectly attributed it to the Order of the Assassins. So Nietzsche uses the phrase to explore themes of moral relativism and the rejection of absolute truths. For Nietzsche, the statement doesn't advocate for lawlessness, but challenges the foundations of traditional morality and urging individuals to create their own values in the absence of universal truths. If you know anything about Nietzsche, you know he's obviously big on nihilism and existentialism.
But does that mean they did actually do leaps of faith? Or, jump into haystacks?
The assassins? No, no, they did not do that, no.
No? Did they have hidden blades, probably?
No, no wrist blades, I'm afraid. Although they did use daggers or short swords, mostly.
So no cut fingers then.
No, no cut fingers, no.
Okay, okay.
Not necessary. They get to keep all their fingers. I don't know how realistic it is to go undercover with this obvious trademark of missing a finger. Like, I wonder if he's an assassin. So let's talk a little bit about the facts then about the Order of the Assassins. So often they would infiltrate cities or courts, but not like social stealth exactly as in the game. So it wasn't like in Hitman, where you can just put on a costume of a tradesman and walk into a castle.
Okay.
No, yeah, I mean, people back then weren't stupid. It's probably much easier to do that now than it was back then. So, no, the assassins, they could be going undercover for like many, many years, and they would very slowly gain the trust of people around them, and they would wait for the perfect opportunity to assassinate their target. What was very much real, though, is how public and symbolic those assassinations were. So they would very often take place in daylight and in public places like marketplaces or in mosques during daily prayers as a kind of psychological warfare. It created a serious fear among people, and assassins were often expected to give their lives during their assassinations. Sometimes they would attempt escape, but their willingness to die for their cause gave them a reputation that fueled much of the myth of the Order of Assassins.
Yes, so the historical assassins were actually Nizari Ismailis, who were a much smaller Shia group of Muslims inside a Sunni Muslim dominated world. So often they would target Sunni political and religious leaders, but we won't be delving much deeper into that. But that's kind of the idea. The truth is, though, they targeted whoever they perceived to be a threat, never mind what religion you were. They would also attack crusaders that threaten or attack them, for example. There's also some evidence that they could be hired, including by their rivals, whether Muslim or crusader, but it's unclear how often this happened or how often they were just being accused of doing so by their enemies.
Now that we talked about the historical Order of Assassins, let's take a look at the other big part of Assassin's Creed then. There's the historical element, obviously, but then there's also the very science fiction element to it. So Patrice Desolé and the other team members actually talked about this in depth too. So Patrice mentioned that he liked the narrative device to be similar to Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, where the story is being told by the protagonist after the events, basically. But this time around, he felt it would be a little bit too cliche. So he was actually inspired by a TV show about DNA and thought to himself, what if there was a machine that could read memories of your ancestors' lives? And basically invented the idea for the Animus this way. So the Animus being the machine that the real protagonist of the game, Desmond Miles, who is living in the year 2012, steps into and relives the memories of his ancestor Altair, who is an assassin in 1191. So Patrice and the team really like this idea because it can explain so many of the gameplay elements in the game. Why is there a heads-up display? Why can you not harm innocent people? Why can't I go there on the map? Why can I retry missions if I die? Why can I jump 5 years into the future from one assassination to the next? How can we glue hundreds of years together in a franchise? What if we want to do the Kennedy assassination? What if we want to have Assassin's Creed about ninjas? It was just a perfect excuse, really, and it's basically a plot device. It's just a very clever plot device.
Yeah, that's true. It's making it a lot easier, isn't it, with the idea of synchronization and, desynchronized if you're doing something, quote unquote wrong, basically. So,
Yes, like
yeah,
dying.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, you're not supposed to die.
Yeah, you missed a haystack, brother.
Yeah, leap or fail, definitely.
Nice. Leap of flail.
Leap or flail, yeah. But yeah, there's actually so much more to talk about in Assassin's Creed, like, Patrice's idea about the future games after he made the first one, for example. That's something really, really interesting. But it might be a good place to leave it for today. We really couldn't have done this episode without the help of one of the best articles on video game development that we've come across.
Yeah, absolutely. So Polygon's Assassin's Creed, an oral history. Uh, we'll link it in the description, and it has so much more really cool details collected from many of the development team from Ubisoft Montreal. I know we focused heavily on Patrice Desolé, but there's also David Chatanov, the lead level designer, Alex Druin, the animation director for Altair, Matthew Mazzaroli, the lead programmer, and many more. So please do check out the article if you found this interesting, because we just couldn't list all these people and what they've contributed and shed insight into easily. Also, we didn't mention the producer at all, Jade Raymond, who was obviously a massive contributor to the success of the franchise as well, and one of the very few women in the gaming industry.
So yeah, props to her.
Props to her, and props to you, Player One. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you want more Assassin's Creed, then let us know and we'll be sure to get started on another episode. After all, we only just touched on the very roots of this massive franchise.
So what about you, Player One? Do you prefer the old action style Assassin's Creed games, or do you prefer the modern approach of the RPG Assassin's Creed games? Please let us know by dropping us a message on our website, gaminghistory.club. Also, have you checked out our giveaway to win a customized Gaming History Club SNES? It's so easy, you have the chance to win this super cool Gaming History Club painted SNES pal. But anyway, just check gaminghistory.club/SNES to find out how.
Remember, entry closes on the 31st of May, so you still have time to submit, but the clock is ticking, and by the time you hear our next episode, it's gonna be too late. We'll announce the winner on our episode that releases on the 18th of June.
As usual, new episodes of Gaming History Club are released every other Wednesday, so make sure you subscribe and follow us on our social media. We're on Instagram and Facebook as Gaming History Club, and we're also on Blue Sky as gaminghistory.club.
Come back in a couple of weeks, Player One, when we dive into greener gaming, feeling the winds of change. See ya!